name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Spirit. Amen. O heavenly King, the Comforter, the Spirit of truth, Lord, everywhere and fearless all things, treasury of blessings, and giver of life, come and abide in us, and cleanse us from every impurity, and save our souls, O good one. What kind of creature am I? That is, in its essence, what we're hoping to, well, not hoping, but what we're exploring. What kind of creature am I? How am I constructed? How am I made? How do I relate to other creatures, other people? How do I relate to the larger environment of creation to which we have all been given a mission? We'll be talking about mission today. How do we relate to God? This is a question, the central question of the human, the anthropos, as created in the image and likeness of God. And if you recall, one of the major concerns we should have is to not reduce what that means. Oh, that means rationalism. We have a brain. We can think. That's what it means to be in the image and likeness of God. Well, that's partly what it means to be in the image and likeness of God. I've always been fascinated by the study of brain science, to be simple about it, and the degree to which if you damage the brain, you can change the personality. That's a very, very fascinating field to think of. Someone who's good-natured and happy-go-lucky and nice fellow gets in an accident, damages a certain portion of the brain, and suddenly they're an irascible, ugly, angry, cantankerous person, and their personality has changed. So who are they? Who are they? Were they the nice guy, or were they like the cantankerous guy? And is who we are really just tied to the brain in its intact condition? I find this to be a very fascinating field, because that raises more interesting questions as well. Who am I if I can damage my brain today and change my whole personality and outlook on life? Then what on earth happens when my brain goes into the ground? When I die, when I cut off blood supply, when they pump in the fluids to preserve my body, if I've gone that route, my brain is no longer functioning. Well, who am I then? That's a theological question. Because the human person, as we understand the human person, is not limited to who they are when their physical brain is intact, which is why we have to be careful of placing too much emphasis on rationalism. Too much emphasis on what it means to be in the image and likeness of God is to think, is to have reason, is to have dialectic and logic. These are parts of it, and these are remarkable gifts, but we can't be reduced to that. Otherwise, we end up with a very, very distorted image of the image of God in man. It's language, of course, and so this is what we've been talking about. It's a multitude of things. It's rationalism, yes, but it's language, it's personalism, that we are created to be persons with consciousness. One of the great questions for scientists, and I've been reading a very, very remarkable book, and I have to plug it because it's one of those books that is just so mind-bending. It's by a gentleman named Ian McGilchrist. And Ian McGilchrist is a neuropsychiatrist. So he studies the brain. So this opening stuff here about the brain, this book comes in 2 incredibly big volumes. And it's a study of how we relate to reality by understanding brain science. But it's more than that, because he's not just a neuropsychiatrist. He's what we call a polymath. A polymath is someone who is brilliant at like all subjects. So he's a neuroscientist, but he's also a philosopher, and he's written extensively on art and religion. And he's one of these people that can just speak in this broad range about all these different fields and tie them together, and it's absolutely riveting. And I forgot why I started talking about him now. I was gushing about him. But he has a book called The Matter with Things. The Matter with Things. And if you want a challenge, especially I would say if you are scientifically minded, if your field is math or psychiatry or neurobiology, medicine, this is the book for you, because it's absolutely incredible. And so much of it is completely compatible with an Orthodox view of the world, even though he is technically not even, I would say he was probably consider himself, he's not a Christian for sure. I'm not sure what he would say. I don't think he considers himself a religious person, but he has a religious sense of awe at all of the mystery of creation. And that's why I started talking about this. He said one of the most complicated issues for scientists is to understand how consciousness can emerge out of inert matter that has no consciousness. How can we have consciousness if the stuff from which we evolved had no consciousness? How does consciousness come from non-consciousness? We have no possible close explanation of that scientifically today. There might be some scientists who just have faith that we will always be able in the end to explain everything scientifically. That's faith, though. That's more like faith. But another image that he gives is that if you take a naturalist view of creation, of where things come from, you have to account for Bach's St. Matthew Passion. How do we live in a cosmos, in a creation where Bach's St. Matthew Passion is one of the end results, this absolutely singular work of brilliant musical art? Where does that come from? Science isn't even close to being able to explain that. So he's a scientist, but he's in awe and wonder at the beauty and mystery of the world. And in that sense, he comes to a kind of religious reverie. And it's one of those books, it's if you order it from Amazon, it's expensive. It's like $145. It's absolutely worth it. It comes in 2 volumes, and you can't believe how heavy they are. Remember, in the old days, they used to actually have textbooks in college. Now everything's online. You can go to college and not buy a single book. Isn't that depressing? But this is like getting the old textbooks that are like so heavy and dense, you can't believe like what is in this. But then you start reading it, and it's just so readable. So that's my plug of the day. The Matter with Things by Ian McGilchrist. Yeah. He also wrote a book called The Master and His Emissary about the role of the brain and the body and consciousness and everything else. So very interesting stuff. So we're rational. We have language. We are personal. We are, what we said was that ultimately the mystery of the image and likeness is that of the incarnation itself. That we don't actually know the meaning, the true dimension of the image and likeness of God until we get to the incarnation. There's another facet of this, though, that's related to that, of course, and that is to draw out that further and say that the human being is created from the very beginning to be the inhabitation of God. We were created, this is what it means to be created in the image and likeness of God. We're created for God to meet and dwell within us. That's what we were created for. We are created to be the meeting place between God and creation. And that's what we mean when we use the language of the human person as microcosm. We sum up all of the cosmos, both physical and spiritual, within our created reality that was given to us by God. And mediator, we mediate that created reality to the uncreated, who is God himself. We are the meeting point, but that means we are made to be filled with all the fullness of God. And this we see so much in the language of the New Testament, in the epistles, the most remarkable thing about Christianity, the thing that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense, especially to the Greek world, which is why St. Paul speaks of this so often. We are made to be filled with all the fullness of God. That's the mystery of the image and likeness. And it means that when God creates things and calls them good, what that means above all is that the human person is created good. The human person is created good, very good. It means that the world is worthy of love and is called to rise up in love to meet its Creator through the human person. It means that we are open. It means that we are changeable, but in a good sense. Sometimes we think of change negatively. It's hard to change. Sometimes we say, things change and we remember the past, and the past is always better than today and the future that we worry about. We live in nostalgia for what things once were. We sometimes daydream, especially if you had a good childhood, what it was like to be a child, and now we've changed and we've become an adult. Now we have all these cares and we have these worries and we have all this real damage, that we all carry around and work through and work with. Change is hard, but change is part of how we're created because God creates us open. That's one of the things it means for us to be in the image and likeness of God. But open to what? And that becomes the key question as we head into the fall. We're open, but we're open to what? We can only be our true selves when we find ourselves in God. And that's why the incarnation of God, the Word, is the revelation of the meaning of all things, the uniting of all things in Him, things in heaven and things on earth in Christ, is the visual revelation of what all things mean in the first place. If you and I move towards Christ, we find ourselves. If we move away from Christ, we lose ourselves. And it is very, very easy in this world to move away from Christ. We have so many voices trying to get our attention and command our allegiance, and so many ways that we can try to construct an identity that has nothing to do with Christ. And we can even do that as regular churchgoers. We can say, okay, Christ, you get Sunday. Okay, no problem. I come, you're the man and the God, and it belongs to you. But, the other 6 days, or really Sunday afternoon till Saturday night, those are me. Those are all mine. And I will construct my life and my identity, my wants and desires and preferences on everything but you. And the whole world has been structured now for it to be easy to do that. And that's why we suffer. That's why we suffer. That's why we don't notice the image and likeness of God functioning within us, because we're trying to construct our identity. Who am I? What kind of creature am I? On destructive forces. They don't feel like destructive forces. They don't look like destructive forces. In fact, the problem is we enjoy a lot of those forces. They're fun. They're funny. They bring pleasure. They bring delight. But anytime we fail to take something from creation and not refer it in a priestly manner back to Christ, back to God, we are misusing it, and therefore it is contributing to a sense of confusion, a sense of loss, a sense of, who am I? Not in a positive, what kind of creature am I in Christ, but wait a second, who am I again? I don't even know now. And what does religion have to do with it? That seems so irrelevant. We have to deal with that fact. We have to deal with the fact that we're created in the image and likeness of God, but we don't always feel God, and for many of us, we don't often feel God, and many of us may even feel like, I kind of think I felt God, but I'm not sure I ever have. I mean, there's something there. We probably wouldn't be here if there wasn't something there, but do we want more? Because God made us to receive more. That's part of that openness. That's part of that change. There's always more. We're created in his image and likeness to be his habitation, to be the temple. And again, we talked about this last week, but there's the tabernacle as the presence of God for his people, and then there's the body as the presence of God personally. And in that presence, we begin to experience what it means to be the image and likeness of God. So we are open to God. We are open to Christ. And the real mystery, it's not even a mystery. In some ways, the gospel today of the Samaritan, it's so simple. It's so simple to live a life oriented to Christ, but it's hard. And that's the challenge. It's simple, but it's hard at the same time. And we'll talk about that in a moment when we talk about the news. But the other thing that I want to emphasize, let me continue on that. So, image and likeness of God, the habitation of God. Last year we explained a little bit about this. There's a wonderful book called The Religion of the Apostles. I know some of you have picked that up by Father Stephen DeYoung. Another wonderful book. I do have a critique of it in that it's a bit of, he's an Old Testament scholar. He's got a PhD in Old Testament, and he makes in that book all kinds of very, very fascinating connections. When you read the book, you're not sure what you're supposed to do with them. It's a bit of an information dump. It's all very, very interesting, the religion of the apostles. But one of the things he points out, and we talked about last year, but for those who weren't here, or as a refresher, is what else functions as an image and likeness of something else? This becomes an interesting way for us to think of what it means. What kind of creature am I if I'm made in the image and likeness of God? What else is in the image and likeness of another thing? Anyone want to venture a guess, or maybe some of you remember where I'm going with this? What's that? An icon? Yes, that's a good Orthodox answer. Because, of course, the word image in English is simply a translation of the Greek word icon. So anytime we use the word image biblically, we could simply leave it untranslated and say, man is the icon of God. And that, for us, means something very interesting because of our iconography. But there's another thing. See, we're blessed to use icons. We're really not used to bless another kind of thing, which is an image and likeness of something else. An idol. And an idol in the ancient world is always a statue. Right? A statue is an image and likeness. You're taking material and you're crafting it to look like something else, or usually someone else, or some type of person, or some type of perhaps even spirit. And one of the really, really interesting things to think about in terms of man as the image and likeness of God is what false worship looked like in the ancient world, which involved idolatry. But idolatry is sometimes misunderstood. I would argue that actually a lot of times we really misunderstand the nature of idolatry, because idolatry is the act of taking something that is created, crafting it into an image, and then expecting a spirit to enter into that image, so that by worshiping the image, you're worshiping that spirit. That's really what idolatry is. Idolatry is not like, crystal energy, That's not really what idolatry, it could be, but it's not really. Most idolatry in the ancient world, if you think of the construction of the golden calf, the Israelites make the golden calf while Moses is up on the mountain. Moses is the man of God, the God-seer who is seeing God, who is conversing with him face to face, who's receiving the law. The Israelites get bored. They construct a golden calf, and then they worship it. And the golden calf is associated in that time with a very specific person, the person of Baal. Baal is a god, right? He is understood to be a lower g god in the ancient world. What does that mean? Effectively, it means that he is a fallen angel, all right? A fallen angel, a spirit that is in rebellion of God. What do the fallen angels want, though? And this is a creation. This gets into the mystery of the fall of the angels in creation. What do the fallen angels want? The fallen angels want to be worshipped, because and according to the fathers, the reason why they want to be worshipped is because they saw the body of the human, the anthropos, realized that God would inhabit that body and receive worship through the human body, and they were jealous. They wanted that. They wanted the worship. This is why when Satan tempts Jesus in the desert, one of the things he always tempts with is, worship me, and I will give you these things. What do they want? They want to be worshiped. How do you worship a spirit? You create a body for it, which is in the image and likeness of what you want that spirit to be, or what that spirit reveals itself to be. So statuary in the ancient world was image and likeness, usually, in a classical sense, of people, oftentimes of heroes, but more often gods. And most temples to what we call pagan worship, I think that's a mistake. The pagans were simply a tribe, and I think they've cornered the market on all worship that isn't either Jewish or Christian or Buddhist or Hindu, although sometimes Buddhist and Hindu are simply described as pagan worship. That is obviously a ridiculous oversimplification. In the ancient world, little soapbox moment for here. There's a great diversity of worship, and they really seemed to know exactly what they were doing, or at least they thought they knew what they were doing. And it had nothing to do with the Pagani tribe, okay? So I don't like the word pagan worship, but in what we call pagan temples that predate Jewish Christian worship, there's always a big old statue in that place. The statue usually has wide nostrils or a wide mouth, so that the spirit, which is associated in the ancient world, spirit and breath are really the same thing. In fact, in Hebrew, they're the exact same word. Spirit and breath are the same word. So the idea is you make a statue, it's got big nostrils and a big mouth, so that the spirit that wants to be worshipped through that statue can inbreathe the statue, and now you have something that you can worship. Yes, you're worshiping the creation and not the creator, and so we see that language in St. Paul. But the whole idea is that stuff has been crafted as the image and likeness of a spirit who wants worship and wants people to worship them instead of worshiping Christ, who inhabits the human body. Who inhabits the human body. So this is a key understanding of what it means to be created in the image and likeness of God, and to realize this profound mystery that God himself is worshipped in and through the human body, and that this is what precipitates the fall of spiritual evil and the whole development of the idolatry system. Okay? So we could talk, any questions about that? I find this stuff really fascinating. Any questions? Yeah.
I was born a Roman Catholic.
Uh-huh.
They have statues,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I was told to pray to the statues and all that.
Yeah.
So it was, is that why we don't do statues? Because statue, as you said, is worship the statue.
Yeah.
Whereas we have icons.
Right.
We don't have statues.
Right. So the question for our home audience here, what about statuary in the Roman Catholic Church? Why don't we do that? And is there some interplay here? We do use what we call relief carving, which is another form of image and likeness. Sometimes that's simply, well, you can see in some of our woodwork. In some of our woodwork, you can see we have carved into that woodwork essentially icons that instead of being painted are relief. All right, so they're not three-dimensional; they're still two-dimensional. They're against a flat surface. So we do use statuary in that sense, but it's always iconographic, and it's always meant to function as icon, not as statue, not as idol. Worship this thing that's inhabited by the spirit of that thing. Right? That's really what idolatry is. Now, I would not go so far as to say that statuary in the Roman Catholic Church is somehow idol worship. I don't think of it that way, and I don't think they think of it that way. I think they think of the three-dimensional statue in the very similar way as we think of iconography. So I think we have to be careful not to be too condemnatory about that. But it is notable that we're more sensitive about that. If we suddenly wheeled a statue out here and said, now we're going to make prostrations and kiss the hand of the statue, we would all feel really weird about that. Number one, because we don't do that. That's not something that's familiar to us. But it would feel strange. It would feel strange. So I think if you think of a statue of Mary or a statue of Joseph, and those are probably the most prominent statues in Roman Catholic practice, they're usually off to the side, they're usually stationary, and you go and you kind of pray to God in the presence of the statue. You're not really kissing the statue or bowing down, are you? Or were you? Yeah, you were bowing down to the statue? Yeah.
I guess there was not enough education for the people to say that you worship God and not the statue.
Yeah.
But it's hard when you're not educated and people just follow the practice of whatever they see.
Right. Yeah, and so again, for this, it's hard when you're not educated on what you're doing to really understand what you're doing. And I would agree with that in the sense that to bow down to a statue, again, it's a different kind of thing than venerating an icon. Venerating an icon is clearly not meant to simply be a representation of something. That's not what an icon is. We're not saying this looks like that person, now bow down and kiss them. The icon is always a window, and the stylistic quality of the icon is as a window transporting us and revealing that there is a greater reality present here. And that's what we're acknowledging when we venerate an icon. A statue is so dense, An icon is a spiritual window. A statue, usually of marble or of wood, it's hard, it's dense, it's like it is the thing. So if you bow down and kiss a statue, it's hard to think that that is drawing us into a spiritual reality because the statue is such a physical reality. There's really nothing spiritual about it. It might be an incredible work of art. It might be incredibly graceful, but it doesn't say this is opening the kingdom, because a statue belongs so much to the stuff of this world. No matter how artistic you are working marble or carving marble, it's still marble. Whereas when you paint and you use color and light and shape in the image, what you're in a sense, you're taking material things and you're transcending them into a spiritual thing. And that also, I think, is part of the mystery of the human person as the image and likeness of God. We're called to become something greater, particularly after the fall. And I realize that what this can confuse our topic a little bit, but after the fall, this will be more obvious. But even before the fall, we have to realize we're called to become something greater than we are. That's the importance of God putting saints in every generation and making sure that if you want to find a saint, and if you want to see what a person filled with God and realizing the image and likeness looks like and feels like, you can do that. You can do that. You can go and you can meet saints. I won't tell the whole story again because I know I've told it probably a couple times to some of you. Some of you probably haven't heard it, but this is what Archbishop Alexander did when he had a crisis of faith. He was doing a PhD at Oxford University. He started to wonder, is any of this true? I'm studying theology. I'm from this Russian noble family. And sometimes this is the hazard of intellectually approaching religious themes and philosophy is you sort of get muddled in the head and you start to wonder, how do I hold on to all this and is it true? And so what he did very simply and shortly is he went to Mount Athos with that question. Is it true? Is any of the stuff we're reading about real? Is the theology real? Is all these stories of saints and the things that they do, are they real? And so he went to Mount Athos, and he met St. Paisios. He met Elder Emilianos. He met St. Joseph the Hesychast. He met St. Porphyrios of Mount Athos. And in meeting these people face to face, he was overwhelmed with, okay, yeah, it's true. It's true. Everything you read in the lives of the saints is true. What it looks like to be a human person and be filled with the fullness of God is true. And God does not leave us alone in that. He does not say, just accept it, do your duty, be good little kids, and I'll reward you. That's not what our faith is. God gives us. He gives to those who seek everything they need to realize it is true, and that means that I'm made in the image and likeness of God. That means I'm on a journey. There's a mission in my life to become something that I'm not now, and yet to be given just enough right now to be able to take the next step towards sainthood, towards what it means to be filled with the grace of the Holy Spirit, to become an icon, which is an image, and another part of all of that is the body. The body is good. And one of the things that the church has always maintained is that a full human person is a body-soul unity. And sometimes if you've heard of a psychosomatic illness, that is, you have a bodily manifestation of a psychological problem. That's what we usually mean by psychosomatic. But of course, those are Greek words, psycho and soma. Suke means soul, and soma means body. We are a body-soul unity. And that means to be a full human person is to have a body and to have a soul. In fact, St. Maximus the Confessor even says that a soul without a human person, without a body, is not a full human person. And this gets back to that question that we started with, what kind of creature am I? What happens to my personality if my brain gets damaged? Or the ultimate brain damage is death. What happens when the physical structure of my brain ceases to be and it breaks down? Who am I then? And interestingly, this is part of the mystery of our existence. So I think we'll have to maybe have room for one more question and then close on this. But we are a body-soul unity, and that means that without a soul, our bodies are empty and lifeless. And this is the pain of death when we see the body of a loved one whose soul has left. You feel it. I mean, this motivates almost all human action in history, is to look at a dead human body and to be absolutely struck by, in a sense, the sort of slow burning terror of it. Where did they go? They're not there anymore. That's just a body. But a soul without a body is also not a full human person. That doesn't mean that it ceases to exist, and it doesn't mean that it ceases to have a kind of spiritual consciousness, but that consciousness is a very particular one, and we'll talk about that next week. It has to do with the breath of God in us. So if a statue is a three-dimensional object carved of wood or stone with an open mouth or nostrils into which a spirit goes in, that really makes it interesting when God creates Adam and breathes into his nostrils and gives him the spirit of life. What spirit dwells within us? Where does that spirit dwell? And what part of our createdness is associated with the presence of the spirit that has been breathed into us? And where then does my identity lie? Where does my personhood lie? Those are the questions we'll pick up with next week. And just two images on this that I think are so important. Number one, this is why we do that really weird thing at baptisms when we breathe on people. The priest breathes on the child. And it's like, especially I feel sorry for the non-Orthodox, we don't prepare them very much, and they're standing in the back there, and I walk back there, and the first thing I do is go, and it's like, whoa, that is just really weird. But it goes all the way back to, what did God breathe into Adam, and why are we breathing at baptism? And when we ask these questions about identity, we have to acknowledge the world has gotten to such a precarious point where identity issues are becoming epidemic. People don't know who they are, but they also don't know even what they are. They don't know what they are. And there is a philosophy that says, well, nothing of what you are is solid. Nothing of what you are is unchangeable. Therefore, if you think you're trapped in the wrong body and you wish to change genders, well, you're open. Therefore, you should be able to change genders, right? And you can be something that you are biologically not. And even that now is a condemnatory statement in our culture. You can be something that you're biologically not because identity is fluid. Where does that come from? I realize we're going to start talking about some sensitive subjects like this. Obviously, I'm referring to transgenderism, but the heart of transgenderism is to feel that our identity is unstable. It's not connected to the body that we have. And how do we resolve that tension? And here I'm not talking about, even on a therapy level. I'm talking about a philosophical level. What does it mean for someone to be in that state? What does it mean for someone to feel that their identity is fluid and they don't know even what they are, let alone who they are, and so they try to reconstruct a new identity? How does that relate to our theology, our anthropology of the human person, that the human person is open, that they're meant to change, but of course they're meant to change towards Christ? What happens when Christ is no longer the target? Everything kind of goes in all directions. So we have to explore some of that and explain it, hopefully in a compassionate way, but also in a very clear way, because we live in a time of such vast philosophical confusion that we don't even know what a body is. It used to be we doubted the soul, or we doubted, like, who am I, Now we don't even know what a body is. That's how confused the world has become. That's a creation level event. We are, right now, what we are struggling with in a broad sense of society are creation level events. Morality, forget morality. Morality is like way down the line. We're at being level. We're at ontology. What on earth am I? You see, and if I don't have a stable idea of what creation is and who and what I am within creation, then really anything goes. Okay, we need to stop there and do the hours. In fact, no questions. We just have to go do the hours. Sorry about that.